Alright, in this lesson, I'm going to show you guys how to take a sketch like this one and convert it into a layout like this one in Photoshop. Now, this isn't by any means a finished version. We basically want to use Photoshop at this stage to plan out the basic layout, and then later on we're going to apply other effects like drop shadows, gradients, textures, images, and more interesting fonts and things like that. But this is generally a good stage you want to get to before then, because if you go straight to the stylization, you can spend a lot of time just fidgeting around and kind of wasting a lot of time. So I like to start here, move to this, then do the stylizing, and then code it. So as you can see with this sketch, it's pretty simple, but there's a lot of information here, as rough as it is. You can see there's a logo here, top nav. There's a slideshow here where you can see there's controls on the left and right. This will tell you what slide you're on. We've got a header, subheader, paragraph, a call to action link, and then we've got 3 different columns, each with a header, an image, and a paragraph. And then we've got some footer nav links, footer text, and then some social media icons. So let's get started. So in Photoshop, let's go ahead and create a new document, and we want to go to the web preset, and we want to set the size to 1024 by 768. Now this is a pretty standard size for websites, and that's generally because that's the smallest resolution screens usually get to. Devices like tablets or netbooks or older computers, generally you won't have a screen with a lower resolution than this. And the reason you want to make your layout set to the lowest resolution is so that people with those sized monitors don't have to scroll horizontally. You want to be able to fit the entire web layout on their monitor. So generally with the height we can go much taller than this, but this is what's called the fold, and you don't want your main content to go below the fold. You want to have everything up there, meaning you don't want people to have to scroll down in order to see the most important content. 72 is the standard pixel resolution, and RGB is standard for the web, and white is fine. So let's hit OK. Okay, next we want to take this sketch and bring it in to our composition. So we can just right click on that, choose open with Photoshop. I'm going to hit Command A or Control A in Windows, and then Command C or Control C in Windows to copy it. And then I'm going to switch over and then hit Command V to paste it in there. Now every time I hit Command in Mac, the key that you hit in Windows is Control. And every time I say Option for the Mac, you're going to hit Alt in Windows. Just a general rule of thumb. Alright, so now I have that sketch inside of my layout. I'm going to hit F. That's going to bring me into full screen mode. Now this sketch is going to be used as the base for my layout. Now you might end up having a sketch that's either bigger or smaller than your layout. And in either case, I'll start in the case that it's too large. Let's say you paste it in and it looks like this. You can't see the whole thing. To resize the layer that you've pasted in there, hit Command T. That's going to bring up these controls. Now you need to be in this full screen mode in order to see these corners. Otherwise, let me show you. If you're in a windowed mode like this and you hit Command T, you won't be able to see those controls. So you have to hit F. So I'm going to hit Command T, and then I'm going to hold Option and Shift at the same time and drag inward. That's going to allow me to fit it in there. Now the way I'm able to move around like this is by holding down the space bar and dragging. I'm just going to hit Enter. Now for some of you it might be too small. Same deal, hit Command T, hold Option and Shift and drag outward until it fills your screen. Okay, so I'm just going to rename this layer by double clicking on its name and call that Sketch. And then the other thing I'm going to do is click this lock pad icon, and that's going to lock this layer down to keep me from accidentally making any changes to it. Okay, before we go any further, you'll want to make sure that your window arrangement is roughly the same as this. You should have your layers palette over here, and you should have your general tool options up here, and then your toolbar to the left. And if not, you'll want to go to Window, Workspace, and set it to Essentials. Now, if you don't see that, if you're using a different version of CS, then you'll want to probably choose something like Basic or Standard or something, one of these top options. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is use the rectangle tool. So go down here, click and hold, and if you don't see the rectangle icon, you'll want to click and hold and choose rectangle tool. If you have a hard time finding this over here, the hotkey is U. That'll bring up that tool. Now up here, you want to make sure that it's set to shape layers, not one of these other two. If this is slightly different, it might be a drop down instead. Again, you'll want to choose shape. Make sure it's rectangle, and then over here for the color, let's click here and then choose kind of a light gray color. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw rectangles for all of these boxes that we see. So I'm going to start with the logo, just click and drag. And since I'm in shape mode, it's going to create a whole new fill layer with a vector mask every time I create a shape. So I'm just going to double click and rename that logo. Now, one thing that's going to come up is it's going to be hard to see our sketch underneath these layers. So I'm going to change the blend mode from normal down to multiply. That'll allow me to see through. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing for this slideshow. And then I'm going to drag another one for the footer or the controls. I'm going to do another one for that call to action button, and then one for this image. Now I'm only going to do one of these because all three of these columns will be identical. I'm going to show you later on how to duplicate these as a set very easily. Okay, and then lastly, I'm going to do these three icons here, and to get a perfect square, just hold down the Shift key. And actually, what you need to do is start dragging first and then hold the Shift key. Otherwise, it's going to add this shape to the same layer as the previous one. Okay, one way we can easily duplicate this is just by hitting Command J. What that does is it creates a copy of that layer, but it's right over top of the original. So to move it, I'm going to press V to switch to the Move tool, and then just drag it over. I'm going to hit Command J one more time and drag it over. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and name all these layers. Now sometimes when you have a whole bunch of layers and they're named kind of ambiguously, it might be hard to identify which is which. So one way you can identify it is by turning the layer on and off by clicking the eyeball. And that's going to show me over here what I just triggered. So that was the slideshow. So I'm going to rename that slideshow. Next, I'm going to rename that control. Okay, so that's one way to identify. Another way is if you have the Move tool selected, just right click on a particular item, and that's going to bring up a list of all the layers that are under your cursor when you right click. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to rename that Call to Action. Next, right click. Call that Image 1. Okay, one other way we can select an object is if we have the Move tool. If Auto Select is unchecked and we have this set to layer, if you hold down the Command key, just click, and it's going to automatically select that layer that's under the cursor. So I'm going to call that Social Icon. Hold down Command, click, Social Icon 2, and then command click. Social icon 3. Okay, I've got my main blocks down. Next, I'm going to start adding some text. So there's two different ways we can add text. First, I'm just going to click the text tool. The first way is just to click and just start typing. So I'm going to type logo and hit enter. Now you'll notice it's kind of hard to see, and that's because you'll notice the color is the same as this rectangle. So to set it apart, I'm going to click that color, switch it to white, hit OK. Next thing I'm going to do is adjust the size. So just drag this icon over till we have a nice big logo. Now, while I'm in the text tool, I can switch temporarily to the move tool by holding the command key and just dragging. All right, and I want it set to bold. All right, so that was the first way to create text, is just with the text tool, just to click and start typing. Now another way we can create text is to drag a rectangle. And that's going to let us type within this area. Now before I start typing, I need to switch my type from white to something darker. So maybe this dark gray here. And I'm going to start typing the name of my links. So home, and actually, okay, about, contact, FAQ. Now right now these are obviously too big. So to select all of these, I'm going to hit Command A, and then I'm just going to drag the size over to something like 25. All right, now typically with nav bars or navigation links, you want to have them evenly spaced, and you want to have quite a bit more space than here. Now one way people do that is just by hitting a bunch of spaces, but that can be kind of cumbersome because let's say you want to change the amount of space between all of them. You have to go into every single one and adjust their space individually. So since I find that kind of inefficient, the way I prefer to do it is select all of that, click here to bring up some more text options. So I'll bring up the character palette. Then I want to click on the paragraph tab, click this far right option. And what that's going to do is justify them to spread out evenly. So the advantage to this is if I need to adjust the spacing, basically I just click and drag the bottom corner, and they're all going to maintain the same amount of space. So once I like that, I'm going to hit enter. Now one thing to note about hitting enter is there's actually two different enter keys. There's one that's right above the shift key, and there's one that's on the number pad. If you hit the one above the shift key, that's just going to go down one line on the text. So you want to hit the one on the number pad. Now, if you have a keyboard that doesn't have a number pad, so like if you're using an iMac or a laptop, then you'll want to hold down the function key and then hit enter. And that's going to do the same thing. All right, so I'm just going to adjust that. Next, I want to type this header here. So I'm just going to do a single click. I'm going to type header text and hit enter. Now there's two ways to edit text. One is if you have that text layer selected and you have the type tool selected, you don't necessarily have to be in edit mode where you see, this cursor and the underline. So basically if I adjust it now, it's going to adjust the entire thing. Whereas if I'm in edit mode, by clicking on this, I have to have something selected in order to make the change. And it's only going to adjust what I've selected. So I'm going to press escape to get out of that. So I'm going to adjust this about, 30 is good. I want to make sure it's bold, and that's good. Now to duplicate that really easily, I'm going to hold Command and Option. And you'll notice my cursor becomes a black arrow with a white arrow. That means it's going to duplicate whatever I click and drag on. So I'm going to click and drag this down, and I want this to be my subheader. So I'm just going to type subheader text and hit enter. Only this time I don't want it to be bold. I want it to be regular, and I want it to be all caps. There's a really quick, easy way to do that. I'm going to click here for my text options. I'm just going to click these two capitalized T's, and that is going to automatically capitalize all my text. So now I'm just going to change the size to maybe 20. Drag that up. Now if this looks a little small to you, it's because it's zoomed out. If I zoom in to 100% by hitting Command 1, this is going to be the actual size of the layout. So at this size, it actually doesn't look so small. I just want to make sure everything fits on the screen. All right, next I'm going to I'm going to create a paragraph. So I'm just going to click and drag and type a couple words. Now it's doing the same thing as my nav above, so I need to make a few adjustments. So I'm going to hit Command A to select all, switch to left justify mode by clicking that, change the font size to about 14 or so, click here, and then turn off the all caps. All right, now I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter. Now, if you want to get a whole bunch of text and you don't want to have to make up a bunch of text, or you don't want to have to just type random words, one way you can do that is use lorem ipsum text. So this is a site I use. It's lipsum, lipsum.com. And lorem ipsum is just random Latin text that you can use as a filler. And since it's in Latin, and since Latin's a dead language, you don't have to worry about people reading the text and, commenting on that. It's just going to be random filler. So what we want to do is go down to the bottom right here and choose the number of paragraphs and just hit generate lorem ipsum. And now we've got our random text. So I'm just going to highlight the first couple sentences and hit Command C to copy it, or you can right click, choose copy. I'm going to go into Photoshop. I'm going to click where I had a couple words, highlight it, and hit Command V. And it's going to fill the whole thing with text. I'm going to hit enter. Now, if you need to adjust the spacing at all, just click on the paragraph. Actually, it's going to be character. And then right here, this is going to adjust our leading. So you can just adjust that to whatever until it looks right. All right, so next I want to create some text for this call to action link. But before I do that, I want to make it a little bit darker because I'm going to use some white text, and I want to make sure it shows up. So I'm going to hold down Command, right click, choose call to action, and I'm going to click here, get something a little bit darker. And actually, you know what? I clicked on the wrong thing actually. I'm going to scroll down here. If I want to adjust the color of one of these shape layers, basically just double click on that icon and then choose a darker color. Okay, now I'm going to, with the text tool, choose a white color. So I can just click on that white background and then just click, type call to action. Now I'm just going to adjust the size and style. So I want to set it to bold, drag that up. Looks good. Hold Command, drag it into place. Now lastly, I want to create a little white triangle, and that's just going to indicate that this is a clickable item. So I'm going to go down to the rectangle tool, and then up here I'm going to choose the polygon icon. And for sides, I want to make sure that's set to 3. And for style, I'm just going to choose this one with the X through it. Now I'm just going to hold Shift and click and drag to the right. And that's going to create a nice little triangle. Okay, now I need to create these different columns. So I'm going to switch to the arrow tool, pressing V. And just like before, I'm going to hold Command and click. That's going to select that header text layer. Now I'm just going to hold Option, drag it down here. And I'm going to do the same thing for this paragraph text. I'm going to hold Command, click here, hold Option, click and drag. Now if I need to adjust the size of this, I'm going to press T, switch back to the text mode, just kind of drag it into place. Hit Enter. Lastly, I've got this one little line here. So I'm going to switch back to the arrow tool, hold Command, click on that subheader, hold Option, and drag it down here. Now since these other two columns are exactly the same, what I'm going to do next is show you guys how to group and duplicate groups. So grouping can be really useful when you get a whole bunch of layers like we have here. It can be a little bit confusing if things aren't organized. So I'm going to hold Command, click on this header text so it's selected. Then I'm going to hold Command and Shift together, click on this gray box, and with Command and Shift still selected, click on that paragraph and then click on that subheader. What I've done is I've selected multiple layers. And having done that, I'm going to hit Command G, and that is going to group them into one single folder. And I can click this arrow and it's going to show all those layers that are inside. So I'm just going to rename that column 1. Now if I want to duplicate this whole column with the arrow tool still selected, I'm going to hold Option and just drag it over to the right. And I've duplicated that whole group. So I'm going to do that one more time. All right, lastly, I need this footer nav and the footer text. So I'm just going to duplicate this head nav. So I'm going to hold Command, click on that nav, and then hold Option and just drag it down here. Now maybe I want it to be a little bit smaller, so I'm going to press T, switch to the text mode, click on it, and then drag that bottom right corner. Then hit Enter. Then I want to adjust the size to about 15, maybe a little bigger, 18. And then I want a little line here. So to get the same style as this text, I'm going to hold Command, right click, and choose Lorem Ipsum. Now I don't actually want to drag it over this way because right now it's inside of this group. So what I want to do is actually duplicate it in the layers palette. So I'm going to hold Option here and click and drag this down. That way I just make sure that I'm not duplicating it within this group. So I'm going to collapse that back. Now I duplicated it, but it's in the same spot. So I'm just going to hold Command, drag it down here. And then since I have the text tool selected, I'm just going to click, drag this over, and I'm going to hit Command A and press Delete. And I'm just going to put some footer text like site name dash copyright 2012, all rights reserved. And then hit return, go down one line, and then type site designed by Jonathan Early and hit enter. You generally want to credit yourself at the bottom, and that can be a way of promoting yourself. And also, by having links going back to your homepage, that's going to help boost your search engine results. But that's a whole different talk. Okay, so now that we have all of our content, I'm going to scroll down, turn off this sketch, and you can see we've got the whole thing fleshed out. Last thing I'm going to do, just for organizational purposes, is just make sure everything is named and grouped. So first of all, I'm going to group all this stuff into a header group. So I'm going to press V to switch to the arrow tool. And by the way you turn these windows on and off is by pressing Tab. That can really make things much easier. So I'm going to hold Command, click on the logo, and then hold down the Shift key, click that box, and then click that text box. Now I just need to click it once because this is all one item. And press Tab. See, I've selected those 3 items. Press Command G and rename that header. Now same deal, hold Command, click that gray box, hold the Shift key, click that other gray box, hit Command G, and call that slideshow. Now I'm going to hold Command, click the header, hold Shift, click subheader, paragraph, call to action, triangle, and that gray box. Hit Command G and call that side box. Now these are already grouped, so that's good. Lastly, I just need to group all these footer items. So Command, click on the nav, Shift select the footer, and then Shift select all of these, hit Command G, and I've got the footer. Now everything is in groups. So now I'm just going to reorder these a little bit so that they're in the same kind of visual order as the layout. So footer at the bottom, header at the top, slideshow right below it, and then side box right below that. Now for these 3 columns, I can even group those if I want to be even more organized. So I'm going to hold down Shift and click so that I select all 3 of those. Hit Command G, call those columns. So now I have all 3 of those. And that concludes the lesson. Lastly, you just want to save, call it layout, and you're good. Hope you enjoyed the lesson.